57talk.com, Gary Cubetta, Scottsdale, Arizona, Part 3. Johnny Powers, legendary professional wrestler from the 1960s, 1970s, even a little bit into the 1980s. JP, today we're going to talk 1975, Eddie Einhorn and the IWA.
Sounds great. Let's do it.
The IWA was formed in January of 75 by Pedro Martinez along with Eddie Einhorn. And Eddie Einhorn was famous at the time because he was involved in a lot of new professional sports league. For example, the World Football League, the WHA, and he wanted to get into wrestling, and he created the IWA. Now, JP, were you with the IWA from the onset?
No, I came later on when it's up for a month or two or so. I got a call from Pedro. I was at that time, I'd moved out of the Cleveland area into New Jersey, Voorhees, New Jersey, and I had been brought in as oversight a new Coliseum complex and a sport complex, and bring in a larger international celebrity signature and put everything, kind of shake it into a business model at work, cash flowed. And Pedro, my spiritual papa, Pedro Martinez, gave me a call and said, hey, here's what we're doing. A guy named Eddie Einhorn, who had made his mark with broadcasting of collegiate broadcasting, basketball primarily, with the tournaments and all the rest over a series of years, had just come into some additional money by selling his shares upstream into a larger media concern. And I wish you'd come down and work with me because we have no infrastructure here. We don't really have a business model. And basically, I implied that I was going to say no to him, but because I wasn't really ready to go back in the wrestling business, I wasn't even sure I wanted to come back in the wrestling business, based something new to play in. But Pedro was like my spiritual papa. He's my blood father, but he basically says, hey, come help. And so that's what happened. So they had already started. That was about August, probably July, August. And so I flew in Winston-Salem Airport, Winston-Salem Hype-Thru Airport, Triad Airport there, and we started from there.
JP, do you have any idea why he didn't call you from day one?
Yes. It was never laid on the table, I think. Pedro wanted to do it himself. He wanted to do it with his son, Ronnie. And before, we had kind of parted the ways friendly, but back in 73, 74, I was ready to kind of leave the nest, so to speak. I wasn't dependent on Pedro, but I was close. And so I think he wanted to see if it would come together without Powers, but it didn't. We want the whys for that because the dynamics were not there. The opportunity was there, large, the dynamics. And so I think he wanted to see if he could do it without me, and then he couldn't find another me with the same skill set to build a grassroots business and an infrastructure. It's all well and good to have money, but money doesn't carry the day in certain businesses. You just plow it down a black hole. And when he called me, they were not cash flow positive.
I remember the summer of August 1975, and I remember scanning through the TV dial on a Saturday morning, and out of Boston, I just by chance found this broadcast of IWA, and there you were. And I was familiar with you from the After magazines in Cleveland, but I never thought I'd get the opportunity to see you since the WWF at that time had such a stranglehold on the East Coast. And there you were on TV, which came as quite a shock. And they immediately put you in a program with Dick the Bulldog Brower.
Yes, I had done a program in my own territory, in the Buffalo-Cleveland territory, with Brower, and we created some great matches. We both could really lay some leather in. He was a great pitcher, and I was pretty good. And so, they figured that program would work. Probably would work anywhere in the world. Could have worked in any kind of language and anything.
Were you more of a wrestler, or were you heading towards? Now we're talking IWA one now.
Yes.
But were you more of a wrestler, or were you doing more behind the scene?
I was brought in. Well, they could use some additional strength in the talent department, and they knew that a Brower-Powers combination was likely to draw. But primarily, Pedro, without going too deep, was bringing me in because on the phone when he said, "Listen, we're running shows, Richmond's and New Jersey shows outdoors, and Savannah, Georgia, and Charlotte's and places like that. We're hitting big arenas, getting really good response. We've got a very unique, differentiated wrestling show and talent pool, but there's no underpinning. There's no business underneath it. The boys are only working a couple times and they go home, or they hang around. And so there wasn't a territory as per se, and at that time, there were just like there are territories now, only larger. It was a territory, so you needed to keep the boys working 5 or 6 nights a week, give them one day off if you needed to, but if you didn't, don't do it, to give them a proper payday, to amortize the cost of your whole operation over 5 or 6 shows, or 8 or 9 or 10 shows if you're running 2 shows a night. You're amortizing your costs over a broader revenue base. And you're also keeping the boys out of trouble, because wrestlers get in trouble when they're not working, kept busy. So Pedro basically said, listen, nobody knows here, and I don't want to do it, because Pedro was 28 years my senior, and when I was going in there, so in 75, I would be 32 years old. I still had lots of gas and I think an energy. How to build a business, which meant that when I came in, as soon as I got in, I immediately wasn't so much worried where I was going to be booked, because it was in a couple state areas and I could always drive to it. But I got in a rent-a-car and I went to a station. If I remember correctly, I went to Winston-Salem. I met with the TV station in that area. I met with Coliseum, which was a big town for them. They were close to selling out, so that was their big building, their primary big building, Winston-Salem Coliseum. And then I would go into towns like a little Mount Airy, and that's what we call spot shows. And everybody in that area, whether it was the Crockett's or McMahon's, or every territory had a couple big towns and a bunch of small towns. So you'd work your boys Monday through Saturday night, and sometimes a show on Sunday afternoon or Sunday evening. And so I would go in as an advance man. It wasn't understood by, basically, even by Eddie Einhorn, and I think his name is Robert Hatch, who was his managing director / president, but it worked for Eddie. They didn't understand what I was doing, because they didn't understand that you needed to do that. So I probably seen 25 or 30 towns that I put together, or I tightened up the bigger town, because you can't just work off television. You better have all of your media punched together, your radio sides, your interviews, your newspapers, your posters, all your things got to get coordinated. They can't go, it's very easy long distance to get messed up, and someone said, oh, I forgot to put the ads in this week in the newspaper. And your last 4 or 5 days, if you're not running on a weekly basis, are very important. That's what I did. I built a business base on IWA.
Now, at the time, and for those who are unaware, Eddie Einhorn was trying to do what Vince McMahon did in 1984. He was trying to take wrestling national, and he didn't care if he went into the East Coast, the Carolinas, Florida, wherever. And he had a chance at pulling it off, because was he the owner of TBS, Television Network?
I can't actually remember that might have been the name. I can't remember. It just he had a production company, and he had a syndicated network that was national. And so he had a very hot show, because basketball, especially in the South, is it draws great numbers live and draws great numbers on television, and it's got a strong fan base. It's a very, very big business. And so he had this national presence already as a producer, sports producer, and a television syndicator. And so he used that, and he had no restraints from NWAs or territories and that. And Pedro was always, Pedro was always a rebel. Even though he worked with establishment, he was always known as the rebel with new ideas and would push the envelope. And one of the things he pushed out the door was Johnny Powers. I became the front guy for the rebel side of the business in the main, and not, I don't mean to covered all bases, but that was partly how I moved the business as an innovative rebel, doing things other people wouldn't do for whatever reason, and being basically non-establishment. And so what Einhorn had the ability to put that show quickly, New York, across the country, and Pedro had the ability to bring the talent in, and Pedro had the ability to handle the matches and the matchmaking and the creative side. And so the only thing they didn't have, you fly your talent, which they got bigger guarantees than anybody else in the business at that time. That's how they pulled the rebel talent. And so the Ernie Ladds and the Emil Mascarasses and the Bulldog Browers and the Love Brothers and Ivan Koloff and boys like that, they got bigger per event guarantees than McMahon or anybody was giving them. And so they came for the money, kind of like the McMahon Ted Turner area later. They came for the money, and the fact that they weren't at that time on top in a specific territory working to the major main event angles. And so these boys were expensive. And they're trans. It wasn't like you're in a territory like the Carolinas or other territories like Gagne's territory or that, where guys could get in a car, and most of the times it was only car trans. This was long-distance airplane trans. So, they'd be going from Savannah, Georgia to New York to New Jersey and back into Winston-Salem. And it wasn't organized. It didn't go any logical order from, there was no logical booking cross-country. It was helter-skelter. It was wherever they could pick up buildings and dates that weren't blocked by the local promoters. And so there was a very high above-the-board cost to Einhorn's exercise, and it needed needed to settle down and become a viable ongoing business, and it wasn't when I was brought in.
When you got brought in, you had been wrestling in the Cleveland area for since 1968, pretty much. What was it like going into these different areas after such a long time? The Carolinas, Roosevelt Stadium, and
for me as a wrestler, or for me as a business builder?
Well, a lot of people as a wrestler, because a lot of people didn't really know you.
Yes. Well, I had got over in a lot of places. I mean, at 20, I got over with McMahon Sr. against Sammartino. I went and got over against in the Toronto territory when I was 22, 23 against another talent. I went into Pedro Martinez territory, Buffalo, as a wrestler. I got over there and went up the food chain real fast there. I went into NWA territory in St. Louis. Got up the food chain fast there, going for title matches. Went into Vern Gagne's territory in '67 with Johnny Valentine. Got up the food chain to the main event real fast there. So I knew how to play the game. I knew how to enhance my brand, my talents. I knew how to work against anybody. A good talent can take a broomstick and make a match at least for 5 minutes. And sometimes the guys are against were like broomsticks, big broomsticks, but broomsticks. And so I had already my art form as a wrestler coming into a territory was not of concern to me. You know, as long as I was given the opportunity in the bookings and the matches, and the matchmaker was prepared to allow me some latitude, then I got the job. I got the job done in Japan. I got the job done in Singapore. All those things came before Carolinas. So Carolinas was country, and Carolinas, I mean, I'd see the same wrestling fans at ringside in like Winston-Salem and Charlotte and all that were going to Cale Yarbrough's and Richard Petty's NASCAR racing, and they're also going to see Conway Twitty and Loretta Lynn and Willie. They were the same fans, and so I understood them. I come from a lunch bucket background. I'm a working class guy. The fans in the main, the core group, were working class folks. I knew them. They were my people. Even if they didn't like me, I knew how to irritate them. But if they liked me, I knew both ways. So it was not a tough game for me to do that.
Well, I remember the first time I saw you, and I'd seen you in the magazines. I hadn't seen you on TV, and immediately you had a subtle but a very powerful presence, and it was there for everyone to see. So you had no question that you were going to get over. Did you want to go forward as a wrestler in IWA, or did you want more management?
Management. I was tired of the wrestling side. That made give me extra money and a payday, and I never disliked being in the ring, but from probably the age of 25, 26, 27, I really was more interested in the promoting in the background and the television production and the brand building of the whole business and the brand building of other wrestlers and fighters than I was of Johnny Powers. I'd already done that for 5 or 6 or 7 years internationally in a number of countries and a number of cultures and languages. So that was like old news. So I just did that to pick up extra dollars. And also, there's a buzz when you get in the ring and there's 5 or 10,000 people, and for a little bit they're hollering with you or at you, and that's a buzz. That's adrenaline rush. I mean, that's a giggle juice going for the talent inside the ring. But primarily, my art form that I wanted to practice was as a promoter and and eventually a booker. And I wasn't sure at that time, other than help out Pedro for a while and see what my next transition was. And I wasn't sure it was going to be in the wrestling business. It was just it was treading water, having fun, making money.
What did you think of the concept of going national in 1975?
I thought it would work.
You did.
Because once you got out of the mindset that you were bound to anybody's special alliance and all that, and remember, I'd come out of creating the National Wrestling Federation, and I already knew that you could break it out, and they didn't kneecap you, and they didn't shoot you in the alley. So you survived challenging the old guard that used to threaten pretty strongly. And so before McMahon challenged the game, and before Einhorn challenged the game, Powers challenged the game and survived.
Did you think that the IWA could put McMahon and the NWA out of business, or that they would coexist?
Coexist. It's a big country, right? And so I thought it could be carved up. And remember, McMahon still was regional. McMahon Sr. was just Capital City Wrestling and whatever. The same one that I tried to buy back in '68 or so from Toots Mondt and Vince Sr. And so they were, Washington, Baltimore. They were the Connecticut, the Bostons, and down to Philadelphia and over into Pittsburgh. They were regional. They weren't national. There was nobody national at that. Einhorn was the first to push the envelope to go national. Then after that, Vince Jr. followed up on that philosophy. I can do it too, and he got it done.
When you went into the dressing room and you saw all these different stars from different promotions that had been pulled in, from Lou Thesz to Mascaras to Ivan Koloff, what went through your mind? A big talent, array of talent.
Yeah, but Looney Tunes.
It was Looney Tunes. Okay. In what way?
Well, they were all going in different directions. First of all, a wrestler is, a sole practitioner, does his own thing, gets his own job done. There's only so many people can hold the straps, hold the belts, be a champion, get the main events, make the large paychecks, and influence the promoter and the booker that they should keep on keeping on that way. And so I walked in, and these are all rebels. And Pedro hadn't told me, but I knew what I was going to see. And so these were all rebels. And Vlad had a huge ego. Mascaras had an unbelievable huge ego. And Brower did too. Koloff, everybody. There was, and they were getting away with things because they knew Pedro. Pedro wasn't the boss of bosses. Einhorn was the boss of bosses, basically. Pedro was his partner, but he wasn't the control guy. And so they knew they had a guy that was almost a mark. He was overpaying them. But that quickly gets old because I guess I'm justified this. In fact, I probably should get more because the wrestlers are never satisfied with their paycheck. The promoter's always the villain because he should pay more. That's like they look to see 5,000 people and let's say it's a $25,000 house. Wow, the guy made $25,000. No, he grossed. No, he made $25,000. No, he grossed it. His expenses were $22,000. He made $3,000. They would never believe you. And there, Einhorn's costs were above it, so he was in negative cash flow. But the bottom line about going back to talent, it was chaos. I mean, they were all smiling and having fun, but a lot of them weren't working that hard. They were coasting, and Pedro taught me well. If anybody coasts, you tell them. If you coast very long, get rid of them because you got to deliver a product that fans know. Fans are smart. They know when we're really giving it all out almost every night, or when you're not. So it was Looney Tunes. It was kindergarten time, K1.
Was there anyone there that you thought, this guy, maybe Mascaras, who is this is an extraordinary talent, or was that missing? The guy like, for example, Steve Austin, who just blew Vince McMahon through the roof, or The Rock. Was there anybody like that? Just special.
I mean, very candidly, no. I mean, they were all very unique and they were established stars. Mascaras, I wasn't sure he would work or not because, Pedro's Mexican, right? Spanish roots, right? Born in San Diego, grew up and matured in Tijuana from a Mexican general, his dad, right? So I understood that could be a big draw in Los Angeles, be a big draw in Texas. I didn't know if it'd work in Carolinas or work in New Jersey, but it did because he was an exotic. He wasn't great. He's a tremendous showman and a tremendous performer and has drawn lots of money and a huge, huge star in Mexico and Japan.
So when you toured in August and September and October, he was getting a good response?
Yes, he was over. He had the little southern girls lined up.
How was the attendance good, bad, or varied?
Varied, because people were coming out because it was a curiosity. They were like a curiosity circus coming to town. There was different style, more flamboyant. Eddie brought the first to bring slow-mo and stop action. He brought that from basketball. Vince was in the old paradigm, and the ring was made colorful with colorful colors, and the open was a little more dramatic and upscale and current, coming out of the basketball sports syndication world. And Vince's wasn't. Vince's seniors wasn't like that. And so, that was Ole Anderson's, and they were good, tough, real manly wrestlers. And here was kind of a little more wild and woolly show, and so it drew. But you could you only draw so long until it settles in, and then you're going to see if it becomes a pissing contest or not, because there's only so many fans, there's only so many buildings, there's only so many hours of television, and so it hadn't got that stage yet where everybody knew they were going to build a business or not in the Carolinas.
Did Pedro have plans, because the IWA 1, we're going to talk about this in a second, ended around, I believe, November of 75. Did Pedro have plans, things he wanted to do that never got done, directions he wanted to go in? Did he share those with you?
Yes, but I knew him from before, so I knew what those goals and ambitions were. He wanted to be international. He wanted to be a big dog in Latin America and Brazil and all that. It made a lot of sense because he'd seen what Argentina Rocca, an Italian coming up through Argentina, could do into Madison Square Gardens and in Americas and that. And so he had been around a long time, and there was a lot of things he wanted to unfold. He first needed to get the resources, and it wasn't just so much about money. You got to go into to get your TVs opened, you got to go in that. They were locked down in most cases. And so even Einhorn didn't have a real full, great time slot. He had to take whatever would get, and they didn't know if Einhorn, the stations, was going to develop a good product or no good product. They kind of did it. Basically, they did it not to lose the basketball. I don't know if he muscled them, but I knew they'd say, oh, shucks, so we'll take your A product's basketball. Well, your B product is this new wrestling show, Eddie Einhorn, and I guess we'll find a slot for you. So I think that's how he got in. I'm only guessing. And then, but Pedro wanted to go international. It was called the International Wrestling Association. He wanted to go in a number of cases, especially Latin America, and go in through Europe. And Pedro himself, as a fighter, had gone through Australia and New Zealand and all that, way back when they went by boat, not even planes, right?
Yeah.
So he had the brilliance to do that. He had the understanding, and the talent would follow him anywhere. The guys, they didn't always like Pedro because he was kind of an arrogant rascal, but they knew he was brilliant, and they knew money was there. He paid you, so that's why always the boys would come back, and they came back to me for the same reason, because I was trained by Pedro, and that was the same formula I did. Honor the talent, make them work hard. If the money's there, pay them. Try to keep to your word.
Did Pedro have ideas of signing, somebody, maybe even like a Bruno Sammartino, paying him just over the top money to come in, and or wasn't it at that position yet?
I don't think he knew how much he could tap the pocketbooks of Einhorn.
Okay.
But would he? Oh, absolutely. Pedro would steal anybody from anyone in a New York second or a Mexican second because he didn't care, and business is business. Pedro was a pioneer, a pirate, bandit, and I loved him. But he was an honorable bandit. Honorable. You have to be a pirate and a bandit to be a survivor and a promoter.
Wow.
This is a new one for you. That's coming. I bet you nobody else will say that.
No, I've never heard that before.
Hey, I admit that Pedro is a pirate and a bandit, which meant that, but you can be a good pirate, I think. Like you rob the rich and give to the poor, part of it. And so Pedro had an interesting morality, and if he was going to fight you and you were I'm telling you, he would threaten you with putting funny powder under your cars that went across the border if he thought you were smart mouthing him or going to steal something from him. He was a vicious street fighter, and physically a powerful man. When he was at the end of the days, I always watch if he didn't come and try to give me a bitch slap, right? And I was no wussy. So I was trained to fight the fight. One time in Detroit, later on, I'll just digress for a second. Speaking to that point, the Sheik was trying to come in against our territory in Cleveland. All of a sudden, Mark Lewin, who was one of his key guys, somehow got booked in Australia. That's Pedro. He pulled him.
Yeah.
And there were times when you'd have a ring and we'd pull your ring. Not too cool. All your main event shows, your guys show up and there's no ring that night because you didn't know someone would pull your ring. So, this is not patty cake business.
So Pedro wasn't the weak link in the chain of the IWA-1?
Not at all. He was a strong link.
Okay.
It was Einhorn. And I honor Einhorn for what he tried, but we'll get to that whenever you want. But Pedro was not the weak link. No way.
You were only with IWA-1 for a few months, 3 months. Did you see the end coming?
No, absolutely not. I'll tell you how it happened.
Okay.
Pedro calls me up and says, guess what? Eddie just called all the stations and canceled. And this is like maybe a Wednesday or so. Told them that there's going to be no show this week. Why? I said to him, why? It makes no sense. Why? This has a huge opportunity, and it's starting to get legs. This guy's getting legs. And so, which means wind, right? Which means, it could last, a lasting ability to last. And so, he said, because apparently McMahon, that's McMahon Sr.'s attorney, called up the head guy, the chairman or whatever, of Corinthian Broadcasting, who had bought out Einhorn's company and made him a multimillionaire, and said, did you know that your golden boy there, Eddie Einhorn, is in the low-class wrestling business, and that doesn't fit with the upscale college collegiate basketball business and all that. That's bad for your image. And so for whatever reason, that went, the head of Corinthian said, hey, get out or you got trouble. And Eddie folded. And as far as I know, that's the real story. Eddie's welcome to contest that. If he can show me that it's different, that's fine. But the bottom line is, with absolutely no notice, he canceled. Now, you only cancel out of fear. You don't cancel if you think there's an opportunity there. And before that, everybody had smiles. When I'd see Eddie on, he'd have smiles. Hatch's guy would have smiles. Pedro would have smiles. The boys would be smiling. Yeah. And so why all of a sudden, boom, it's gone. So I never was told by Einhorn that story, but that was story. And so so I said, Pedro, I just moved my family down here from New Jersey. I come down to help you. It's fine. It's interesting and all that, but I just worked my ass off for the last few months, not just as a wrestler, but building a territory. I get maybe 2-3 hours of sleep a night. You know that. I know. So what do you want to do? What do you want to do? I want to put it back on the air. Do you have a problem with that? No. Well, I'll call you back shortly. I called, and the ones I could get were the local ones. So I got back a Charleston, a Charlotte, Raleigh-Durham, the Winston-Salem High Point one, Lynchburg, and the rest I couldn't get for whatever reason. That was the New Yorks and the Roanoke and all the rest.
Okay, now this is where it gets a little hazy for me because did Pedro want to be involved with? Since Einhorn was going to pull out, you guys could have just shut it down. The decision was made to keep it going.
Yes.
Was it originally going to be with you and Pedro, or just you?
No, Pedro and I.
Pedro. Okay, the two.
I said, Pedro, let's own it together. So that was, I don't do less than a 50-50 deal. I had a 50-50 deal with Pedro, so it was kind of understood. I can't remember if we said exactly 50, but the bottom line is we own 50-50. And so it was Pedro Powers, and we're picking up the pieces of International Wrestling Alliance. I reincorporated International Wrestling Association, Inc., North Carolina Corporation. I opened an office, new phones, but before that, right from where I was, I think I had a rented condo or townhouse because I was just starting to move in. I hadn't bought anything yet. And so I called the stations, and I said, you will have a show Saturday. They said, okay, JP. And I went and I took tapes that we had, and I patched them together and created a show.
Now, the stations,
yes.
Einhorn had originally lined those up with IWA1.
Correct.
And they were I believe it was TBS stations. Were you on the same stations, or did you have to get a whole new?
No, same stations.
Same stations. Okay.
I just couldn't either find them or convince them, or they were pissed off with last minute moments.
But
who knows?
Were the stations only in the Carolinas?
Well, South Carolina, North Carolina, and Virginia, just those 3 states.
Okay.
And actually, for me, that was a comfort zone, because remember, I'd come out of 3 states. So I knew I could handle it all by myself, with or without Pedro. It wasn't a case of moving Pedro out at all. And that I could control, because I know that if I can get in a car and get there every night, every TV station, I'll hold the thing together, and it will be a business.
Did you and Pedro still want to take it national, or was that just?
Yeah, we did. But we just needed to see how much talent would stay with us, and Moscow stayed for a little bit, but a lot of them drifted away, and McMahon and Crockett pulled some boys.
Okay,
they pulled the Mongols and boys like that.
So IWA1 ends, all the contracts are gone because you have to reincorporate. So do you have to go to the guys and renegotiate with each one of them?
Yeah, but I didn't even sign nothing because I didn't need papers with them, and just say, hey, it's JP, it's Powers, I'm taking over, Einhorn's gone. I may not be able to meet your guarantees. In fact, I don't even want to know what your guarantees are. Here's in the past I paid you well, and let's see if we can make it work on a show-by-show, week-by-week basis.
And then some of the guys started to peel off. I remember that, was it Bolo Mongo went to Mid-Atlantic and became the Masked Superstar?
Yes.
Mighty Igor went to Mid-Atlantic for a while.
I think so. That would be after I was actually out of the area, but probably. I thought he just went back to Detroit.
Yeah.
Okay.
So.
But and so they and some went back up to McMahon, whatever. Because your job is, if someone's on the ropes, there's another promoter coming in your territory, you want to weaken him and hit him in the knees and take him out. How you do that is take his buildings, take his talent, right?
Right. Now, you and Pedro only lasted for a little bit together. Was there a reason?
Yes, unfortunately. I never had a good relationship with Pedro's wife, Mary, and with Ronnie. I respected Ronnie a lot. I made him a booker when he was 14 or 15 years old for NWA because I thought he had better ideas than the rest of us for a short period of time as a fan, But Ronnie didn't want to do a bunch. And so we got at loggerheads, and we had a kind of a shotgun understanding. He says, I'll give you some money to go away. I'll give you $25,000, basically implied more if it was necessary. Go do what you want to do. You probably don't want to even be in the wrestling business. You weren't sure you want to come back to the wrestling business. I said, Pedro, remember, if you offer me something, I can offer it back. Deal, right? So I gave him $25,000. He was surprised that I would even do that. Actually, later, I was surprised I did it. I don't know why I did it. I guess it was a challenge, right? I was still only 33 years old, right? So still full of vim and vigor and gas in my tank, and not sure what I want to do. And I know I can do that. So maybe it was going to be a holding pattern for a while. And Pedro went off, and I worked it for a while. I worked it for, I don't know, a year and a half or whatever. But just while Pedro was still my partner, and he was pissed at me, and I was pissed at myself, a unique thing happened. The Crockett's were able to pull our biggest building, Winston-Salem Coliseum. And we were in there. That was our big town. We were doing big business. It was our major cash flow town. It was a signature town. It was why the town said, wow, I just was main event, did such a paycheck, and we came close to selling out the Coliseum, and we should sell it out next time. And so the lads and the Moss Grosses and all them and Browers were all looking for, it's the main town. It's a key town. Every territory has one or two or three of those. And sometimes only one. And so the Crockett's, smart rascals that they were, with deep roots that they were, went and worked out a deal with Winston-Salem, the city of Winston-Salem, and bought the local junior equivalent of Junior A or whatever, Junior Hockey League, Pro Hockey League, because it was losing money. The city wanted off that losing proposition. And as part of that deal, they got an exclusive on the Coliseum, blew us away. And I did not know. So, and at this time, I was just starting to come out of New Jersey. I was still flying back and forth. I'm not sure if even I'd moved my family down there yet. So this was before Einhorn, just as Einhorn was leaving, and I'm coming there. And so I went and fought at court, but I knew that if I couldn't get that main building back, and Crockett had a lock on the Winston-Salem Coliseum, the Charlotte, all the big Richmonds and all the big arenas, Roanoke, all that. So, and that was the only big hole, big building that we had Einhorn got a shot at. And so I went to court, and 12 just regular folk, working class folk, Carolinas, said that no, it was not restraint of trade, and no, it was not Anti-Sherman Act. And they put big people against me. They had the International Association of Auditorium Managers. I mean, we're talking about hugely powerful. Every major building is part of that. They're a very, very, very strong political group. They brought Vern Gagne in to testify. Oh no, it's okay. It's okay to block other people from coming in and earning a living.
Beautiful.
Yeah, only in America.
What did you sue for? How much?
I don't know, a couple of hours for whatever. Whatever we thought that some logical jury would think that was prudent.
Did you think in some ways this could be a break for you, in that you could force a settlement of some sort, that they had taken such strong action against you? Or would you just prefer they just let you have the arena before the verdict, obviously after the verdict?
Yeah. I don't know. I think I had both thoughts in my mind. If I went away with a big payday, that's a nice way, because maybe I don't want to stay in the business. But also, I was still a wrestler / promoter, that an artist. I still thought I had more goodies to put on the table. I had more to do, especially if I go national. And this would open up buildings, because I could go cross country and say, listen, they had to this is an anti-Sherman antitrust, and so that would be the Muchnicks, the Gagnes, the McMahons in New York, who control the Madison Square Gardens. They'd all have a problem with me because, I'd have this precedent set.
Yeah, suddenly you could go into Madison Square Garden.
Oh, yeah.
That would have been a shock, huh?
Oh, I think it scared the heck of them. They said, oh, my God, we have to beat this boy up, right? And so they didn't literally beat me up, although I bet you they thought about it. And so I probably would have measured up the challenge and said, okay, cool. I now can go in any building I want, because I'll threaten to sue the building. And I threatened to sue the Greensboro Coliseum. I sent an individual letter to all the board of directors. They freaked, and they opened up Greensboro Coliseum. And once I'd done that, I said, oh, now I see the vulnerability. Go to the politicians who just will do whatever whatever the status quo, they'll stay with it unless someone gets them, right? And so I'd already litigiously went against the Coliseum in Greensboro. That opened up. But by then, when I went to court, it took the heart out of me. Because I never thought, I thought, and most people around us thought, we had a right. We were on the right side, but I learned you go to court, it's not right or wrong. It's who has the best presentation, and
a whole bunch of other factors too.
Yeah, and the jury even understand the essence of it.
Yeah,
it didn't happen.
JP, did you have the financing to do IWA too? You had come off a bad experience in Cleveland. Was money always tight?
Yes, I had tapped out on money, but I creatively can come back. Phoenix Rising, yeah.
Yeah.
So I tapped out at 30, but this was 32, 33. I was a lot smarter. And I was also starting to play some real estate projects and all that, and they were going to start to get a little legs. And so I didn't have deep pockets, but I had probably the wherewithal likely to let going. So, but that was part of it. But primarily, I'd been kicked in my artistic heart. I've been kicked in the crotch in court, and I thought, do I really need this? Maybe the business is trying to tell me, go away, find another place, apply your trade and your art.
Can you relate some interesting experiences that might have happened to you, just things that stick in your mind about IWA2 behind the scenes? You had to deal with a lot of fringe wrestlers because the mainstream guys started to move away from you.
I did, and one of the strangest things for me is I forget what car I had to rent a car or whatever, and so I thought, well, I'm going to release a car, and so I leased a Lincoln Town car with a moonroof, very conservative, gray. Didn't think it was splashy, and I drove up in a ballpark, parked close so nobody mess up the car, and Sonny King came over, who was a pretty good wrestler, but then working main event, and remember, just down south, it had only been a few years back that whites didn't wrestle blacks. It was law, and so that worked. The Bobo Brazils broke that, and Sonny King followed up and made big money against that racial concept. And so he said, Powers, you must be making a lot of money. You must be stealing a lot of money. First of all, I'm not making a lot of money, and I don't steal. I talked to some of the boys. I said, who's that? Oh, Boyette, a few of the guys, Mike Boyette, and we want part of the office. No, pay me for it. We're not going to pay you anything. In fact, we want to take control of the office, and we want to control of the booking office. I said, yeah, really, based on what? Well, because we think we can do a better job, and we think we have rights. We just come through the Chicago 7, and we've got one of the lawyers, I forgot what his name was, from the Chicago 7, and we're going to take over. I said, oh, really? I went to Karen. I said, Karen, would you like to take a holiday? Why? We're doing well. Why? Well, we got a strike on our hands. That may be the first strike that's in the wrestling business. We got a strike. That Sonny King, that dude, decided he's going to gather some of the boys together, and then we'd have a territory with probably 25, 30 boys, but there was only maybe a core of 12 or 14, and he maybe have 5 or 6 of them. I said, we're going to shut down, take a vacation. So I shut down, and by 3 weeks, they'd all left because there was no paydays, no money. They were living in hotels, they were fighting, they were boozing, they were token up, and they had no cohesive backbone, and they left, came back, and restarted. That was one. During that time, it got pretty brutal.
JP, that's a great story, by the way. Sonny King's going to run the promotion. Beautiful.
Yeah, right.
I mean, I've heard a lot of stories, but okay, go ahead.
Yeah, with a bunch of marijuana-smoking token dudes like Mike Boett and that. That would have been a chaos. Well, he would have been the champion of champions, the gods of gods. Everybody would have to lay down, and he'd get his hand raised everywhere, and he'd be known, as the kingpin. But anyway, so now if it would have been a few other folks like Ernie Ladd and that, I would have said, hey, Ernie could run the territory, So it wasn't a color issue. It was an intelligence and a business background issue. And so, 1 second.
Yeah, Johnny Powers.
You there?
Yeah.
Sorry. So the bottom line is that that went away. But at the same time, they said, well, I had some crazy guys. A guy named Carl Krupp. We drew a small town in Zebulon, like $13,000. This was, in a ballpark. We sold out. They were hanging in the ballpark rafters, literally. And remember, this is when the main, ringside might be $4 or $5. This town only held about 500 people, and we've got like 1,300 people or so. Ballpark totally sold out. And I give him his strong points in the top, what he should get, right gross off the top. I get a call, and he says, Powers, come over and see me. I said, what's your problem? You're stealing from me. Okay, I'll be with some local. I walk in, and as I get in, he's behind the door, and he's got a great big butcher knife. I mean, a 12-inch butcher knife. He puts it against my throat. Well, I guess you're serious, aren't you? Okay, so let's don't talk about this. We're not talking about nothing. I want another $500 now. So then, I'm not in a very good position right at the moment to negotiate, because he is a little kuda-kuda-pa, that's Japanese for a little crazy, and so maybe he would slit my throat. It's hard to wrestle with a slit throat. And so I call up Karen, bring me $500. Why? Just whatever at the motel, right? I have a little negotiation going on here. So I paid him off, and then the next 3 shows I took it back from him. I just, he didn't know I underpaid him. But it became a hairy, so I went, and this guy named Al Mendel was a sheriff in Charlotte. He got me a permit to carry a gun because I was carrying a lot of cash, and Karen was carrying a lot of cash. Sometimes we'd have, $10,000, $15,000 cash, pockets, bag, in a money bag coming out of a town. And so that's not a prudent thing to do. And so we got a gun, and so I had a little money purse, and when I was in the ring, Karen carried the gun. We had a couple of them, a little .357 over-under Derringer, which would blow a hole in a 2-foot tree, and the boys knew that. And then along came another guy, a young kid, that ended up wrestling in Stonewall Jackson. He was a young kid and wanted to be in the business. He was an arm wrestling champion, a really great arm wrestling champion through all of the South there, and he said, I want to be a wrestler. I said, okay, do. He said, boom, he could beat any of the boys. I think he was going close to world championship level. incredible. And just young, just still in his last year, Guilford College, Carolina. So I said, okay. I said, but in the meantime, you carry pieces. We all carry pieces down south, JP. I said, well, okay. So go get the biggest gat you can get. Have it so it bulges under your shirt. And you just get my back in the dressing room. When I'm in the ring, you look after Karen at the box office. Just get her back. So he walked around. And this is like, the wrestling business is not normally like that. It can get a little hairy, but and so he ended up as Stonewall Jackson. So it was a little, we had some wild animals.
JP, was it difficult handling the TV production? I remember at the time you went through some different announcers. You had a TV studio. Then you went and you did some live broadcasting from arenas. Was it a tough thing to do every week?
Yes, because by then Pedro was gone, and Jack Reynolds, who had working with Einhorn, he was in Cleveland, and a bunch of folks, and I couldn't afford the trans and the back and forth and the hotels and the over-the-top expenses for a smaller area. So I hunkered down, got some local radio folks, television folks, had my own localized color commentators, and we also worked out of small arenas. Back when Vince Sr., for big buildings, he would be in Uline Arena outside of Washington or whatever, which hold maybe, 2,000 people or whatever, and that's where you'd tape your shows to give the impression of the arena environment, but not give away your total Madison Square Garden, full match, full crowd, full main event. That's what we did. And also, kind of a funny, sad thing. Well, some of our shows were taped, WJET, I believe, okay, in Charlotte, North Carolina. The same place and it was at that time owned by Ted Turner before he became the big dude. In fact, Ted Turner was he had wrestling with us, and he had Jim and Tammy Baker. So one time, Jim and Tammy Baker would be asked widows to give up their diamonds, their widow's ring, and we'd be having wrestling in their time. And one time when he was out of money, he went on and asked for help, and they sent $70,000 into Ted Turner. He's come a long way since.
Yeah, the early days, right? Sure.
And he was just starting up in Atlanta with the Super Channel, right?
Yeah.
It was that.
So are you saying he owned two stations?
He owned Atlanta and Charlotte, Channel 36 in Charlotte.
So you were on with Turner, yes, only on the wrong station.
Yeah, totally
JP,
correct.
you're always a bit ahead of your time, right?
Yeah, or yes, totally correct.
At least in the wrestling business.
Yeah.
Was there any moment, I talked about the TV production, where you were just embarrassed at what was, I know it was sheer chaos trying to run IWA2. Was there any moment that sticks out in your mind that was just, oh my God, I can't believe this went on TV?
Yeah, we had a guy, bless his soul, but I can mention his name. His name is Charlie Babb, Southern boy. I don't think he had all his teeth in the top. And it was hokey. Now, we had some good wrestlers, but it was disorganized. I was embarrassed for some of the TV shows down there, but it was only the material I had to work with.
I remember Charlie Babbs, and I remember he'd end each show by telling everyone to go to church. Was he the guy who did that?
Yeah, but unfortunately, he was a non-church fellow. He was actually a pretty devious dude, I believe. I don't know up front, but he was the opposite of a church-going guy. But he did the little, because that's the Bible Belt. That's what you should say down there.
Wow, it must have been an experience. By near the end, did you want it to end?
In a true promoter, hope brings eternal. Yeah, no, yes, and no. But I'll tell you funny stories, because we had, the Nui family, the Afansiki.
The Islanders.
Yeah. Oh, I brought them at one time. Those are scary dudes, man. They'd sit in the dressing room and scare the rest of the guys, just looking at them. And I said, what do you do? So I forgot who was the manager. Maybe Big Bad John or somebody, maybe Donnie Fargo. They went on, they took, remember correctly, they took chunks out of live fish, spit it out on TV. We had and all these things about bringing motorcycles onto that. Well, Vince didn't create that. That was Donnie Fargo bringing his hog on, and he'd go on. You know when you break the Stone Cold Steve Austin breaking the beer cans on his forehead? That's Donnie Fargo. Donnie Fargo hit it enough so it started the old gigs, the old juice would come out. He did that on TV, and so we had one time with the Islanders. One of those boys, we had a broken bottle arm wrestling thing. So took beer bottles, broke them so they're all jagged, and on camera, where the guy who lost was going to get cut the back of the wrist with the beer bottle. So we hot-shotted that rascal. But there were times when I embarrassed it. This is not very cool.
Yeah, but JP, you lost the lawsuit. You can't get in the arenas.
Yes.
Hope springs eternal, but
yes,
you got to have the nice arenas to draw the money.
Yes.
What are you thinking?
I'm thinking desperation. So what happens for about 6 months or so, I backed off. I took the Browers and the Igors and the Powers and Central Q, and I did co-venturing with, I just had a few TVs left and some talent, and I went into the small arenas. So I would go into, a small town, Mount Airy or whatever, or Virginia or North Carolina, South Carolina, and I'd work with a charity group, mostly the JCs, and I'd split them. I'd get my nut off the top, a ring referee, and 8 or 10 wrestlers, and we split the rest to 70-30. They made a lot of money, and we made enough, but it was chicken feed for what I'd been done in the past. So that was just trying to figure out where I go next.
When is IWA 2 officially dead?
When I went over to a real estate brokerage house and started to revamp their internal ICI investment business with a guy named Claudius Dockery. So that would be, I started building my first water slide from recreational about the tail end of 77, maybe first part of 78. I morphed from wrestling into real estate producer developer.
And were you just sick and tired of wrestling? No more?
Oh,
no
yeah.
mas?
Yeah, no mas.
Was you've mentioned a few times the aches, the pains, or worse. How'd you feel in 1978?
Beat up. Although I had enough. I started to grow chin feathers, and I had some folks from Hollywood and New York wanted me to go into the film business. It's so easy, You work for, you get one day script, because you're already an athlete who understands stunts and bumps and television and all that and camera angles. We'll make you the next Steve Reeves / James Bond thing. So and then also I was getting interested in martial arts. So for 6 months I took off and I studied 6 hours a day, 6 days a week for 6 months. Literally, it was 6 times 6 times 6. I did it on purpose. I took up Taekwondo and I took that over into Asia. I started doing mixed martial arts. I initiated that with a bunch of folks. I had some shoot fights and I had some work shoot fights over there. So I started to morph my physical sports combat form, and I took that through 78, 79, tail end was 80.
JP, after IWA 2, did you wrestle a few times, a lot of times, or
a few? I still was making Japan. I was making Singapore, and then in 81 or so, with Tiger Jeet Singh, I promoted. I had an office in Singapore on and off with a film company that had syndicated my television shows from the late 60s, and so I had a satellite office in Singapore. I had a presence in Shinjuku, outside of Tokyo, and I was working for Inoki's office, 2-3 times a year for a tour, which could be anywhere from 10 days to 3 weeks at a time. And then I co-promoted Singapore and Malaysia. I took the Browers and Bobo Brazil and folks like that. Promoted Texas-style death matches through Malaysia and Singapore.
Did any of it work really well?
Yeah, the Singapore one made me a lot of money. I stayed there for 10 weeks trying to build a territory with Australia and all that, and then it just was going to take a while, and I syndicated 13 hours of my IWA show. Hey, maybe that's where some additional idea. In Singapore on Channel 13, so I'd fly in, I said, Pedro, there's some old library, I'm on the road here, I'll split with you 50-50, and so I syndicated 13 hours of Channel 13 Philippines of old IWA tapes. No, I was always on the move.
Did you ever get a call from one of the NWA promoters or McMahon to come in?
Nope.
Was it because of what had happened with the lawsuit?
Probably. They also know they have to stick it where the sun doesn't shine.
You weren't interested?
I wasn't interested in working for somebody else, no. Being their lackey. I watch what happens now when McMahon brings the other guys in and uses them up for a while and spits them out. That's been his strategy, Vince Jr., for the last 10 years or so. Huh.
Yeah, it's real interesting because here you were, this extraordinary talent in wrestling.
Yes.
And yet you have a real natural knack for promotion.
Yes.
And you're kind of looking from the outside in.
Yes.
Yeah. And McMahon and company are starting to expand. You had that new look, and I've seen it up on your website. There's a movie poster.
Yes.
Did you actually make the movie, or is it something that you were hoping to get made?
It was a concept that other folks, and it didn't get done. We went at it twice, but mainly because I just didn't have the ambition. It was going to cost me $2 million, at least a movie and $2 million to promote. I got all the money. I had commitments from Japan and the Canadian film industry and a bunch of stuff and all that. But I knew it was going to own me for half a year to a year, maybe a year and a half. And so I just said, I'm going to be bulldozing this through and shouldering it through. And it actually come up because I just wanted to do something for the kids because I always liked kids. So it was going to be a movie for the kids. It was called The Man They Couldn't Kill. I actually started it in 81, 82. I revisited it about 3 years ago at the Toronto Film Festival. I got half the money back. And then I said, I'm not.
Well, there's no guarantee with a movie, so it's pretty risky.
That's a brutal business.
What happened to Pedro?
After IWA?
Did you stay in touch? much?
Yeah. Oh no, I loved him till he died. In fact, I didn't go to his funeral because I was totally, my back had gone. I was in the hospital. I would go between there, and I was flat out. Could move nowhere except by an ambulance and all that. And so I didn't go. And they at his funeral at the end. But I loved him. I still love him. He was my dad and my mom and Pedro were the most important people mentoring me and developing me my whole life.
And he did talk to you over the years.
Oh yeah.
Did he have regrets that he wasn't able to put a permanent promotion on the map?
But he had already done that, but Buffalo before. So this would have been a new one
in modern day. Yeah,
I think so because I think so. But at the end of the game, he bought out a library out of George Cannon's, and I didn't even know he gave it to me in his will. It was worth more than $2. It's still worth.
I've heard you mention this George Cannon library before. Can you? I don't really understand what it is. Is it from Detroit or is it
Windsor? But it was the Detroit territory for a while. George Cannon was a satellite promoter, was running cross Canada and also in co-venturing with McMahon Sr. out of Detroit. And so he had a whole bunch of original shows, and I've got 100 hours of his. I got a couple hundred hours of other stuff. And they got great talent. They got Macho Man Savage at his peak, a whole bunch of guys like that.
Okay, so this is after the Sheik,
yes.
and George Cannon moved into Detroit and had his promotion.
Right. He was actually out of Windsor, but he was.
And you've got those tapes stashed away somewhere.
Yeah, I own them. Pedro bought them from the widow, and his death, in his will, he willed them.
I talked to Ron probably 1995.
Yes.
Was Pedro still alive then?
Yes, I think he died in 97, I think.
And he said that they had a warehouse full of tapes that they had never converted.
Yes.
Are those the tapes you're talking about, or are they different, or you don't know?
I don't know. They might have been, because they weren't converted. They were in 2-inch.
Yeah, that's what he told me. He said
the masters are still 2-inch, but Ronnie didn't get them. They were given to me, bequeathed me from Pedro.
Wow. Okay.
Maybe that's why he doesn't like. Who knows? I try to get over that because I forgive. I forgiveness and he never hurt me. Ronnie never hurt me. He just never liked me and never wanted to work with me. And that influenced Pedro. And plus, there were times when I was arrogant. I'm still tough to deal with. If you heard that little rim shot before, there was a phone in the background. I just hollered someone to the phone. Comes with my territory.
JP, when you had where was your last match, and when, and how'd you feel, and was it?
I did a couple quasi charity shows. I did. IWA was strong in the Caribbean, and so I did a couple shows in Trinidad and Tobago. Wrestled the original Sheik and then the Iron Sheik, stuff like that. We had main events. I got to tell you, unbelievable story about interesting things. The local promoter, it was the Sheik against the original Sheik, Farhad against Powers, main event outdoors in San Fernando, a big ballpark, and we're all there. Got great publicity. Been in the paper. IWA's in there. I was going as IWA champ. The Sheik was going in as a Sheik, and we all drove up. We get to the ballpark, and there's a crowd, maybe 5,000 or 6,000 outside of the ballpark. Gates were locked. The promoter had not paid bill in front, locked out. We're talking about angry, nice people probably normally, but they just thought they were stolen. I had to get on top of a taxi cab, calm them down, and convince them they shouldn't get. That it was not my fault. I was only a wrestler here, and I was not likely to get my guarantee. So, you talk about. I stayed up there for about a half hour, just saying, this is maybe it. This was like the Cleveland Arena incident, right?
Yeah.
This is maybe. How did Powers go? He was on top of a taxi cab outside of a locked out arena with 6,000 locals, and they got him. They cut him up.
Machete time.
Machete time. Oh, and there was no joke. They thought that I was part of something to steal money from them. They didn't understand. It was a little nerve-wracking. And so the bottom line is they also did some showing back to Cleveland, which I loved. I did some small little spot shows for basically no money, but it was my kind of giving back, and I still want to stay in shape a little bit. So the last thing was like 83. I went into Toronto. I was moving to Toronto a little bit, and I was going to try and do the movie, so I went into Kurt Von Haas in a small arena there, and it drew maybe, 3,000-4,000 people, and I did that. So, but basically, I did 82 or so. I was in Lagos, Nigeria, and Pedro co-promoted it, and I was the booker / main event / the guy who looked after the boys. And guess what? I got get all the money in front. Yes, sure. Well, I got half. I trust him though. He's come to my house. He's a local pharmacist or dentist or something like that. He's a very professional man. He wouldn't steal from me. We broke bread at my house. Lord, Pete, you sure? Yes. I'm going to be over there. You're not. Okay? Yeah, you're sure. So I get there. I got a letter of credit, and the day before the show, I go down, and the guys at the bank laughed at me. Bogus. I said, "Where's the central bank in this little Nigeria?" They laughed at me. Trouble. So the bottom line is that it cost a lot of money, and I'm in the ring. I'm wrestling Bulldog Brower. He wanted to do a hard way, which means hit hard. See if he can open up so each other with fists, not just anything else. And it's about 98 degrees,
Okay.
and I'm going to probably lose $30,000 or $40,000 on my pocket.
Beautiful.
And I said, I don't think so. I don't think this business wants me anymore. This is not working for me. So that was when I really formally. And I had a couple of shows, but
Were you in serious pain?
I looked good. I mean, I got pictures, and I looked great. But I was hurt. The shoulders hurt, neck hurt, back had hurt for 20 years. Well, yeah, I was because I averaged about 9 backdrops or over the top. I figured at one time 9 a match. I did formally as far as they can find out of me, if they got the right numbers, about 5,007 fights. Right? And so multiply that 5,007 by 9 times, so close to 45,000 or 50,000. I got body slammed, and I would take hard, good bumps, and so my back was out, vertebrae that were out, knees weren't working, and I was losing money, and I was going to hit 40.
Beautiful combination, huh?
Yeah. As Jack Leeson said, I think I'm out of here. Stage left.
Were you disappointed? This is a stupid question. I was going to say you're disappointed to leave after everything you've been through, JP. You must have been happy to say goodbye.
I was happy.
Yeah.
It was like a relief. When I made the decision, I thought, oh, wow, it's like a big, like I've been carrying, like Sisyphus. I've been carrying the world up, down, pushing a rock up a hill and it'd go down again. Like Atlas Shrugged or something like that. I'd shrugged too many times. It was such a relief. Couldn't believe it. I said, why didn't I do this 5 years ago, 10 years ago?
Yeah, 15 years.
Yeah.
JP, let me give you some names. Give me a quick rundown, your experience with them, opinion.
Yes.
We'll do IWA 1 first. What was it like to see Lou Thesz still in the ring, 1975?
Still in shape, still could go. You still knew he could beat most of us if it was on the mat, hooking time, I was always stronger than him, but I'd outhook him, I could outshoot him. Classy guy. I felt a little bit sad, though, because, he had lost his money, I think. I don't know this a fact, but he had a son that was on drugs. He had lots of money, property and all that. Kept trying to save his son. Work. He was a classy, great guy, and I felt bad.
Thesz from 75 to 79 was kind of a sad character in a way because he kept trying to wrestle. The mainstream promotions wouldn't take him.
Yes.
Was it odd to see him in IWA when he should be in St. Louis or something?
Yeah, but it was my way of honoring him and honoring the business. I said, Pedro, he's good for business. He's credible. He's a real deal.
Yeah.
So it was, and Pedro said no problem. And so it was, I think, basically my decision to keep the referee and to work in some matches and color commentary.
Yeah.
It was me honoring the business.
Tex McKenzie.
What a big guy. Uncoordinated, but strong. Those legs should have been on a 7'9" giant. But they loved him because he was a Texas guy, and he had the Cowboy Ellis gimmick and he drew money, but and lovable man, and was making money, I think, in real estate as a broker in Seattle, Washington, or whatever. Flew in, too expensive though, and I come from old school. I like to work tight, work close, make it very believable.
That wasn't for him, was it?
No, he was cowboy boots and howdy man.
Al Costello.
Really good wrestler. Did he actually work for IWA the first part?
Yeah, he was a manager. He managed the Love Brothers. No? Or was that...
I forgot now.
No, he was there.
I knew he was with Detroit and with Farhat and all that.
No, he was...
In Pedro and all that. I got a mental glitch, I guess. I don't remember him being there. But I know from before, he was good for business. He could talk, he could wrestle, he could look good, and he knew the business, so he would have been good for business.
George Cannon, manager of the Mongols.
Yeah, great interview. Was a good wrestler way back when and was a kind of a tough guy. I liked him. Him and I were at odds at sometimes because he was George Cannon. But he was good for business.
A lot of people have complained that Mil Mascaras was difficult to work with. He wouldn't sell.
Yes.
Did you ever wrestle against him?
No, but I watched the other results, and he wouldn't. He was not that tough a guy that I know of. I mean, he was a way tougher than almost anybody walking the face of the earth, right? Most of these guys are, right?
Yeah.
But there were guys in our business who were tough. And so, to make a match like anything, you have to have there's a give and take, and you're trying to create tension, trying to create opportunity for a comeback. You just go in and going to strut around with your cape and fly through the air with the greatest of ease, and that was Argentina Rocca's problem too. Before that, and so he was a great celebrity. He was great for the business. He was an icon in Mexico. He still is. He drew money, but when it comes to putting on the art wrestling, he was not the best guy to have across the ring.
How was he like to work with in IWA too? Did he want to stay with you, or?
No, he was arrogant. He'd lost Pedro. Pedro was his patron, his papa, and they would speak Spanish all the time, which I couldn't hear. And so when Pedro went, he basically went because I wasn't going to put up with his stuff, right? Business, get down and great.
How about the mighty Igor?
Ah,
Dick Garza.
Yeah. powerful. I mean, he literally, he would put his back against a concrete wall, get an old truck where the tires were a little bald anywhere, but he would put his body, guts, and his life in the line. He would get up there like you would do a leg plate, and he would blow those tires off cars for real. And when at that time, he would go on and he had brick. Now, he'd soak those bricks a little bit so they were a little go, but a brick's a brick's a brick. He put a towel on his head, boom, Ivan Kalmakoff or whoever was managing him would break it with a real sledgehammer. See, I got a headache. I said, well, you jerk, why don't you videotape it and just replay the videotape? Oh, good idea. I wasn't sure if he was joking or not. And so...
concussions, right? Every time.
Concussions, yeah. I mean, that's what took out some of the boys, some of those concussions, right? The brain's only a little 3-pound brain and a little jello deal in a hard case, right? And so, but he was good for business. People loved him. Down south, they loved him. He was great to work with. He'd given a match. He'd take it. He knew when to come back. Powerful as heck. He was a real deal. When he left, he took my damn North American belt and didn't give it back. Still got to try him. It was the original one that came from Chicago, and I rehabbed it.
Oh.
It's probably in his estate somewhere. I just haven't taken to do it. But I just thought about it.
JP, he seemed to always be on the outskirts of major promotions, yet I've heard that he was a tremendous draw. Is there a reason that he didn't work the St. Louis or WWF? Or?
Well, Ivan Putski was a clone of his, right?
Yeah.
He didn't like to go a long ways, I don't think. The Farhat loved him. I loved him. We're talking about from promoter's side. Minneapolis, Vern Gagne's territory, made a lot of money there.
Was he difficult to work with, negotiate with, or
no?
No.
He was self-sufficient because he bought a whole bunch of rental houses, so he didn't need to go in the ring to survive. He was cheap as heck, so he had great real estate net worth.
Okay, IWA 2, Don Fargo.
Oh, what a unbelievable! He was a Mr. Michigan or whatever. Great shape, always could take bumps, could and all that, but crazy. He would one time I get a call, say, do you handle Fargo? This is Sheriff so-and-so. We've got him down in bars. Why? Wasn't that a big thing, actually, he said. He just went picking flowers for his girlfriend. Yes, so what? Well, the flowers were planted in somebody's front yard of consequence. He just drove up in the middle of the night, vroom, 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 bent over, took the flowers out, went on his way. Cops got called, and that was us. Oh, jeez, and I'd say, what did you do that for? Well, it seemed like a good thing at the moment. I was trying to get in, kiss some ass with my girlfriend. And then other things, he would go into town, and one time he'd drive this car and go into a small town, and all of a sudden he'd make like the car stalled in the middle of traffic in downtown, where there's only one central downtown, and in the noon hour type of thing, and he'd get up and lift the hood and reach over and suck his belly in because he was in great shape. His pants would fall down to his ankles, and he had no gotchis on, no underwear, and everything's hanging out, and he's making like he doesn't know that he's even dropped his pants, and and he'd be chuckling, giggling. One time we're down at Rednecks now down there, right? So he'd go up and he had totally nude, parked his Frobits in behind his leg. It looked like a girl, and he's got great big pec, blonde hair, and punched on the screen with all the truck drivers at the truck stop and said, "Yoo-hoo, boys, I'm out here," and ran like hell, right? Oh, God. He was always getting in trouble. But great talent and good interviews. I hear he's still in Florida somewhere, more tattoos than ever. I should take the time to go down and honor him by taping him. He's an iconic. There'll never be another one like him.
Don Fargo. Okay, Big Bad John, who was...
Oh, great interview.
I almost look at him as an early day Kevin Nash. Never made it big, but big guy, right?
Big guy. Not a great body, but could take bumps, all that, and pretty dang good worker. He had this shtick where he was the general, and this is the general, Big Bad John, and I've come out like a preacher would down to you Southern folks, baptize you the religion of the general, and he was brilliant. You could just say, hey, this is your opponent, this is the town, date, you just go. He was mesmerized. He got heat. They wanted to knife him. They wanted to smack the chairs. He wore that helmet because he was getting things on his head. But great interview. He may be Ernie Ladd, Ox Baker, 1, 2, 3. By the way, Ox Baker called me. I got to return the call. And Ox is the same. He called up and says, "Where's your toll-free number?" I said, "I'm not giving it out to you because you're running out my toll-free number all the time calling me." Because I'm doing a cooking show with Ox Baker, tough guys. And we're going to do some things on the road. And so, but Ox Baker was brilliant. Ernie Ladd was brilliant. Big Bad John, he wasn't up there with one of the three. He was all...
He could have made it as a big star. Did he have problems outside the ring that held... He died in 1979. Were there problems that...
Didn't know. I think he was chemicals, but I don't know how serious or whatever.
Yeah.
And I was so busy. I never... And that was not my world. I didn't do that. So, and I didn't know because I was a prissy guy. I just didn't need it. I was high on creativity and adrenaline rushes all the time doing business, right? So I guess so. But he could have been a star anywhere. So good in the mic. He was big. He wore a full gear, so he didn't have defined pecs or something like that. But it didn't matter. He was good for business. Loved that.
Was there a steroid issue in the business back then?
A little bit, but not a lot. I don't, I think a lot of the guys were little blue pills and stuff like that. But so were the football players.
Yeah.
So, there was no freaky deaky. I started with pharmaceutical fight.
Yeah.
But, I tried got a headache all 3 times and forgot. I said, I'll just do it the hard way. I'm getting headaches. What do I need this for?
Yeah, headaches along with the back aches, along with the elbow aches, along with the shoulder aches, along with the hip ache. Oh, my gosh.
Yeah.
Okay, JP, we're going to wrap this one up.
Okay.
Next, we're going to talk about your career outside the ring, because I find you fascinating. I mean, you could have been put down a number of times, and you kept coming back. Yeah. And I think that's a very difficult thing to accomplish, and yet you were able to do it.
I appreciate the compliment. Thank you.
And we will talk about JP. Thank you so much.
You have a great day.
Have a great day, and we'll talk soon.
Thanks for the interview.
Bye,
Ciao.
JP.